High school football season is now just 10 days away, and Louisiana vs. All Y'all's class-by-class season previews are diving into the large school outlooks. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Make sure you take a second and hit that subscribe button below. I'm Jarrett Roser, and I teamed up with a group of great high school sports reporters from a range of print, television, radio, and digital backgrounds from 10 different regions around the state to share their perspectives on the season ahead. Hopefully you may have already had a chance to check out the Class 1A, 2A, and 3A videos, and there's no better place to start talking some Class 4A than in the 337 out in Lafayette with KATC's Jamarcus Fitzpatrick and several of the state's top contenders right there in Acadiana.
I don't know that there's been a better area of the state for 4A football in recent years than Lafayette and Acadiana area. When you look at all of the teams last year, in the state championship games are all 337 area teams. And this year, looking at the primary districts, 4A has OC Como, North Vermilion, Northside Range, St. Thomas More, obviously a back-to-back state champion, Turlings Catholic, that Westgate squad that you mentioned, that is always as tough as anyone in the state. And then 4A, you have Beauchene, Brobridge, Cecilia, and Opelousas, the two teams that met on the non-select side, and they have Livonia in that district with them. And then also in 4A, a little bit toward the further out edge of y'all's coverage area, Eunice out there. But particularly 4A and 5A and all these teams that were just in the Dome last year or have been in the Dome in recent years, it seems from the outside like it's going to be another real exciting year of 4A football in Lafayette.
It absolutely is. Teams like Opelousas and Cecilia, I mean, they went at it in the Superdome, and they're going to be fighting to get back there. Talking to, Jimmy Zachary in the preseason early on, he said that, the main thing that they want to do is run it back. Like, everybody talks about doing that after you win a championship, but you can really sense and feel that these guys believe that they can do it, and they have a ton of talent to be able to do it. You talk about Zacchaeus Malvo being their starting quarterback. He was the MVP of the championship game. He's a guy that he can make all the throws when you need him to, but when you got a running back like Deshaun Ford in the backfield, sometimes you don't have to do that all the time. But he can make plays for them. And then, Corey Amos and Landon Hammond and all those guys that they have on defense, Jonathan Ford, those guys that they have on defense to, be able to stop teams as well. And then you can't forget that Cecilia is returning great talent over there as well with Diesel Solari, Brent Gordon, and so many others to lead the charge for them as well.
Yeah, the Cecilia and Opelousas 2025 classes that have been for years now so great for those programs are now finally seniors after both making historic runs last year as juniors, and so it'll be really interesting to see how they fare this year in their kind of swan song of high school before a lot of these guys go off and play college ball. In that District 4A, STM, we didn't mention STM a ton just now, and I feel like that's been kind of a vibe with them this offseason, is that as great as they've been a little bit under the radar this offseason, I guess because of all of the turnover of graduating that great senior class that they just graduated. What is your feel for the Cougars? Because as much as sure they have guys now, off to college and whatnot, they have done as good of a job of reloading every year as maybe anybody around the state.
Yeah, I mean, a Jim Hightower-led football team is always going to be, a strong football team. So I don't think that, them having much turnover is going to affect them very much. I think that they, have the ability to still go out there and win plenty of football games because they're going to be, disciplined. They're going to have alignment and assignment, and they're going to line up and they're going to play you for 4 quarters. It is to be seen what they're going to do at the quarterback position, and things like that. But I think that this is still going to be a very good ball club.
You have the two districts, 9-4A and 10-4A, and at least from the city standpoint, there's kind of a clear top team to watch in each. In 9-4A, Archbishop Shaw, that has been so resurgent the last year plus under Hank Tierney being back over there in the West Bank. Bell Chase, Kenner Discovery, St. Charles Catholic makes the jump up. I'm going to have a chance to talk to Eric Ritchie a little bit more in the River Parishes preview about the Comets and kind of what to expect from them and the Willow School. But I think a lot of expectations from the more city-based teams of those Shaw Eagles.
Shaw, I've really been kind of having my eye on Shaw the last few years. Even with when Coach Connors was there, I really kind of liked the direction they were going. And I think, whenever you got a chance to get Hank Tierney, you kind of got to do it. And and I know they had a couple rough years there, but I think Shaw's going to be really interesting. I mean, you know about Jasper Parker at running back. He's Michigan commit. He's not signed yet, is he? I don't think he's signed.
No.
But okay, yeah, Michigan commit. He's a big time running back there for sure. They're bringing Mason Wilson back at quarterback, and I really think their secondary is going to be really deep. I'm sure you know Rontre Carter is back. I want to say he's 2027. But they got Jackson Williams, and I don't know if you know about Jackson from basketball. Yeah, he's because he's actually a transfer from Newman, and he's like 6'2", 6'3", like probably right around 200, and he's gonna play some safety, and I hear he's pretty good. Playing football too. I know he's really, really good at basketball. You can kind of watch out for him there too. But Alan Shaw is another one who's a basketball kid that's going to be playing. So definitely just going to be keeping an eye on them for sure.
With 9-4A, where St. Charles Catholic lives, and a team that has been as steady of an expectation of they're going to make the Dome year in and year out and had the state championships in the middle of that, ended last season with a heartbreak, and now jump up to 4A. And so that'll be a big storyline, watching how the Comets transition to this higher classification level. But they have been, again, so steady. And I know you've had a chance to visit with Coach Stein and company here recently. What's the outlook for St. Charles in this new district that includes Archbishop Shaw and company and this new classification level in the big picture?
And can you, I mean, Coach Stein not only wants to go to 4A, but they really want to go to 5A. This is like the first step. And even just a few years ago, he was talking about St. Charles he wants it to be one of the best schools overall, sports-wise, baseball, basketball, all the sports. He wants St. Charles to be thought of in that upper echelon of programs, athletic programs in the state. And he told me a couple of years ago, the goal was to get to 5A. So that's lofty expectations, and it's incredible. I think they have over 100 players out there. So I looked at a stat the other day because U-High is one of our VSN teams, and U-High has been at least to the semifinals. Jared, I want to say 12 years in a row. Is that? I mean, it seems outlandish, but I mean they've made a run like 10, 12 years in a row, at least to the semifinals, and I think they've won 4 state championships over the last 12 years. So now suddenly the team that they always scrimmage with, the traditional U-High and St. Charles scrimmage, well, now you're talking about St. Charles is right there. St. Charles has been to the state championship 5 years in a row, right? They were going for a three-peat. They had lost to LCA, was their nemesis, the last couple of years of Coach Monica. But Brady St. Pierre, Kyle Cannon, 2 huge names that they're going to have to replace. A sophomore quarterback, I think right now, Leandre LeBlanc, is the guy that they really, really like. Coach Stein talked about his athleticism. He's just a sophomore, but he's already been in the war because we talk about St. Charles as a talented football team. Think about what they've done in baseball, right? And Coach Stein has led that team to state championships. So LeBlanc played last year and played a key role as a freshman. So he kind of has that, what Coach Stein refers to, kind of has that he's more mature than his age and his year. Skylar Edwards, a junior running back, is a guy also that you're going to hear a lot about this year, and really think, I think St. Charles, and again, the way they ended the season last year, losing the lead. Remember, he goes for it on 4th down, they get stuffed, and Calvary Baptist right down, boom, touchdown. So you're like, oh my God, did that just happen? And then I know you were at the Dome quite a bit. I don't know if you remember what Coach Stein said. He's like, I'm trying to think how he said it, but it was kind of like, wow. Like, these guys got to learn to lose, because he's up there with like 4 players that are all baseball players too, that had won 3 state championships in baseball, 2 in football. And this is going to be a learning experience, but absolutely fuel to the Comets' fire to get back to the Dome. But man, to step up to 4A, they got Lutcher week 2. I think they got Newman week 1. They're going to play Dunham. Obviously, they're playing a 5A team in Terrebonne this year. Belchase and Shaw in that district that you were referring to. So, man, it is going to be a challenge. But ever since we started riverparishfootball.com in 2010, and I'm in Coach Monica's office and we're getting ready to do an interview. And here comes like a little skinny guy, 5'5", 100 pounds. I'm like, is he a ball boy or, oh, that's my outside linebacker. I'm like, no, it's not. He goes, yes, it is. And then they compete, right? They win nine regular season games every year. And now they're a perennial state champion appearance every year. So, man, again, Wayne Stein is so intense and such a good coach, the defensive mind, and he's got some great offensive coaches with him now. Man, it's going to be fun to watch. It's really going to be fun to watch them.
And then 10-4A, you've got Abramson, McMain, Douglas, GW Carver, and McDonough 35, the Ron Eagles and Coach Daggs and company that have been a really steady team, steady program for so long, going back even, before Coach Daggs, Coach Reese, and on through the history. But your thoughts right now, mid-August.
I know you mentioned 3-5. We all know Ja'Kai Anderson and his brother Kippy. I think, both of them are going to be impact players again and, probably lead the way for them in that district, I would think.
Transitioning into that 1-4A district where I think most folks after the last couple of years around the state know they need to keep an eye on North DeSoto. And that group, along with North DeSoto, is Booker T. Washington, Bossier, Loyola Prep, who climbs up, Minden, Northwood Shreveport, Southwood that you mentioned, moving down from 5A, and then Woodlawn Shreveport. Is this year for Coach Dunn and company with those Griffins, is it going to be another year where we're watching North DeSoto among the top contender type teams on a statewide level, do you think? And then, what else are we watching in 1-4A of maybe a little bit of a sleeper surprise spoiler type team for folks as well?
I mean, I think it would be stunning if North DeSoto wasn't there again in some capacity, certainly in the district. I mean, Luke Delafield's only a junior.
Yeah.
It seems like he's been around for like 5 years. I mean, seriously. And Cole Corey, a lot of people, and listen, I'm not saying it, but I've heard from people that know, that I sort of believe in a lot of stuff, could be one of the best receivers in the state. I mean, we're not just talking about the best receiver locally or one of, but so that combination right there. I mean, Jared, you just think about, we talked about Ben Taylor and Airline. Now we're going to Delafield, who was number 4 in the state. Shreveport had the number 1 passer, Taylor, number 2 passer, Abram Wardell, who we're talking about, and Luke Delafield, number 4. Those guys combined for 11,000 yards, 132 touchdowns, and 21 interceptions. I mean, those are just crazy. So come back to Northwood, they're going to score points. They've got those 2 guys already mentioned. They always seem like they have dual 1,000-yard rushers that you may not have known their name before the season. All of a sudden, they got 2 kids rushing for 1,000 yards. Lake Bates filling that hole defensively is going to be not a problem, but it's those are big shoes to fill defensively. They were so good defensively. And in order to make it to where they want to go, back to the Dome, they fell one step short last year of going back. Defensively, they're going to have to be as good as they were, but they're going to score points, and they're certainly the class of the district. But the Northwood Falcons, they always seem to be in the mix. I mean, whether they've had a couple slow starts and then they're there at the end. Usually, we get that North DeSoto game late in the year, but since everything changed, I think it's week 4. Yes, it's week 4. So really, you're going to weed out somebody early on in that district race right there.
In all Lafayette area or Southwest Louisiana team or district. When you look in Leesville and DeRidder and some of those teams a little bit farther north are there, along with Eunice a little bit further east, Iowa right there, Washington, Marion, and Lagrange. Iowa, if I'm not mistaken, is up from 3A, and so that's kind of the first thing that catches my attention. Iowa's been in that great 3A district with some battles. How do you see the Yellow Jackets faring up in this 4A group, and what's kind of your outlook for the 3-4A landscape overall?
That district is always a ton of fun. You've got a classic rivalry, one of the best rivalries in the state in Leesville, DeRidder, with a battle for the Hooper Trophy. Leesville's going to be pretty darn good again. If you have Xavier Ford in your backfield and you just hand it off to that guy, good luck. I mean, he's one of the most explosive backs I've ever watched. He's awesome. DeRidder's always going to be good pretty much defensively. Offensively, you never know with DeRidder. But look, you add in, Iowa, and then, Eunice is also in that district. I think that's going to be a fun game. I have a lot of questions about Iowa. Coach Johns is a phenomenal coach. They're always going to be great defensively, but look, they've lost some pieces on the offensive side of the football. I think they've got to replace, I think it's like 7 starters on both sides of the football, if I'm not mistaken. Look, it's going to be interesting to see how they do it, because you're losing guys like Cole Corbello and Josiah Bushnell, Luke Guillory. Like, you're losing huge pieces of your offense, of an explosive offense. You know, they've still got guys like Jadian Adams and Jonathan Walker and the younger Bushnell, but I'll be curious to see how they roll offensively. I think defensively they will be all right, but I'm curious to see Iowa. Iowa is one of my favorite places to go because they feed you pretty well. The jambalaya. You walk into the press box and they go, "Hey, what would you like to eat tonight?"
That's good to know. That's a program that because of some of the prospects in recent years and whatnot, I've watched from afar and always kind of had them on short lists of some games and wonder if I can get a trip out there or if they happen to have a playoff game or something maybe closer. And I haven't had a chance to see them in person, but you're adding quite a selling point on top of the football if I can get out there to a home game. You've got Lutcher in 8-4A, another team that is trying to get back to the top of the mountain where they were just a couple of years ago. Another team that's talented once again and has a new quarterback, but someone that head coach certainly knows and trusts quite a bit. Tell us about the Bulldogs and the expectations for them, because I think those are sky high in their own right this year.
Maybe the first time in the storied tradition of Letcher football that a father-son combo has been the starting quarterback at Letcher. Dwayne Jenkins, starting quarterback at Letcher in 96. Obviously, he was, Tim Detillier was his mentor, and he just learned and learned and learned. I mean, I don't know of anybody who loves the game of football like Dwayne Jenkins, and learning it, and you just studying different offenses. He's a brilliant offensive mind. And then every I told you about the Thanksgiving Day River Parish tour I take every year, and there's 2 little Jenkins boys playing catch, or the years that he went to the Dome at St. James, and then the next year at Letcher, there's Zach and his little brother. And now Zach is the starting quarterback, right? Last year he split time with Quinn Smith, the big tall guy who was a great baseball pitcher, is a Southeastern baseball guy. But basically Zach's role last year was that short yardage. We need 3-4 yards, kind of, run it in. Well, he's the man now. And he is very, very confident. It's so funny. It's, again, my daughter is a senior as well this year. And it's just, they're so mature, right? And when I watch Emma on the volleyball court, she's, telling players where to go. And it's very similar to what Zach Jenkins is doing right now. He is a leader of that football team. He has taken on that role. Coach Jenkins and Zach, they both aren't shying away from, my dad's the coach, I'm the quarterback. And Zach Jenkins has earned this spot, right? Coach Dwayne could have put him in last year and been the guy, but that wasn't what was best for the Bulldogs football program. It's going to be fun watching him. And look, they have got running backs, receivers, and that's just on the offensive side. Defensive, Sterling is Rashad just committed to Houston, and a great relationship with Willie Fritz, another get from our area, headed to Houston. It is going to be a fun run for Letcher as well. Obviously, just like you get relationships with the coaches, the players, the programs, right? We're not, we're, as journalists, we report on what's happening. I do more of the kind of like the feature stuff, right? I kind of preview games, put mics on coaches, and kind of try to spotlight as many players as I can. But man, you just pull for them, right? I don't think, out of the 8 River Parish teams, there's nobody I don't pull for, but there's some that you really pull for. And I just hope great things are ahead for the Bulldogs. And it's something that Zach and his dad and his younger brother can look back on, years from now and just have an enjoyable experience. But they're going to be fun to watch. And I went to practice last week, and I saw talent all over the place. And they got some good offensive linemen. Defensively, they're short on numbers, I think. I think if there's like kind of a weakness, it might be on that side. But, those dingoes is what they call them at Letcher. They've just got an attitude. And I look for Letcher to do big things too. But 4A is loaded again. He says Opelousas is clearly the team to beat in Dwayne Jenkins' mind. It's rare that a coach says it. I usually, my last question is kind of like your keys to the season. What do you have to do to be successful to get to your goals? And he goes, well, we all know that the team to beat is Opelousas, and we gotta handle that. And I'm like, okay, so that was unsolicited, that answer from Coach Dwayne. But they're going to be focused, and they're going to study and be ready game plan wise each and every week, and it's just going to be fun to watch that team.
They're going to be solid again. I mean, Coach Jenkins' son is finally he's going to be the starting quarterback this year. That's going to be a big deal, and that's he's been very capable in that role. And I generally find that sons of coaches do well when they have those opportunities. But you've got Rashad Sterling, who's committed to Houston over on the defensive side. He is a huge disruptor. If you think back to when they won the title a couple of years ago, he was such a linchpin for them, and most people don't realize they have several other guys who are back from that team too that are older and wiser, and I think they've kind of shuffled the deck maybe a little bit scheme wise, and they're going to be fun to watch too. I think.
Yeah,
always
yeah.
on.
I'm looking forward to them on a statewide level, what they can, and obviously the playoffs are a long way away, but what they do all season and where they are come playoff time. In 8-4A, which is another really fun district to watch, a lot of Bayou Parish teams on down the list. There's AJ Ellender, Assumption, Edie White, Lutcher, Morgan City, South Lafourche, South Terrebonne, and Vanderbilt Catholic, all in that league now with Edie White coming back up to 4A. And so that one, I think you look and you see Assumption with the way they've come on in recent years, and Edie White and the success they've had, the tradition of Vanderbilt Catholic. And obviously, Lutcher has been just historically one of the top public school programs in the state in terms of winning state championships. How much are you looking forward to some of those Friday nights with that 8-4A group, and what do you have your eyes on in terms of some of the potential there?
That district's going to be awesome. You mentioned they have some teams that have competed for state championships recently. Lutcher, obviously, Edie White. 2 years ago they had U-High, Cajun Phil. Right there, have a chance to win that game, and they just missed out. But those are some really consistent programs. Vanderbilt's really consistent. They're usually pretty good. They can count on them to get to the playoffs every year, maybe win a playoff game or two. But I think looking at that district again this year is going to be pretty exciting. Lutcher. Obviously, I would say right now it's the favorite, even though Assumption is the defending district champion. I know Assumption, they've done a really good job building that program up under Coach Will Broussard. Last year they came out of nowhere and, beat Lutcher on the road at Lutcher, and then dominated district play. Reese Turner, who was all-world quarterback / receiver. He did everything for Assumption, but, he was pretty much unstoppable, and helped them get to at least the third round. They had a chance to maybe go to the semis last year. I think a double overtime loss to Northwest at home. That could have went either way. They had a couple questionable calls in that playoff game, but Assumption has always been a traditional power. It's the only school in that district, the only school in that parish. And, you look at all the great talent that's come through there, Brandon Jacobs, Tremont Williams, a lot of really good players. That program has, DNA running through the current players' blood, you can say. They did lose a lot, though. They lost, Reese Turner, and they lost Chase Jacobs, their big running back from last year. But I think they got some new kids coming in that can maybe help them win contend in that district, but Lutcher, I would say going in, Lutcher probably is the favorite right now because they have a lot of returning players, and Coach Jenkins does a really good job every year in, year out, building that, keeping that consistency going. But Assumption, you can't count them out. They really got some really good guys, and I'm looking at some of the notes I jotted down. Some returning players, Landon Sanchez, at quarterback. They got a really good offensive lineman in Jace Williams. Assumption usually always has a really good offensive line. So if they can, get some new players, some experience, I think they can do pretty well. Kobe Bima, is a receiver. He's pretty good too. He caught a lot of really good passes for him. you can't count the Mustangs out. And Coach Broussard has some life in that program. And if you go on campus, they have a lot of projects going on. I think they're getting turf field this year for the first time. They're rebuilding their gym. So there's a lot of excitement in Napoleonville right now. So they're going to be in the mix. Edie White every year, I mean, I can't remember a year where Edie White just hasn't been good. I mean, Edie White, now they did lose a lot from that team, the last couple of years that, just been dominating the whole area due to graduation. But one thing about Coach Kyle Assign and his staff is they are good at what they do. They don't change up a lot. They is very consistent with their game plan. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have a big offensive line. They're going to have a big defensive line. And their defense, people look at the Edie White defense and they'd be like, those players are good, But when they get on the field on Friday nights, they're shocking everybody with how fast they are, how physical they are. I think you're going to see the same thing from Edie White again, And they know all of the teams in that district. They compete against Vanderbilt and Assumptions every year. Letcher, I remember a couple of years ago when they had Big Lunch, Winfield kid, Edie White smacked them in the mouth. So, and that's a big rivalry that goes back decades with Edie White and Letcher, and so Edie White's going to be there. Kyle Assign is a great coach. Him and his coaching staff. One thing I say about Edie White is you're not going to catch them unprepared because they are going to scheme. They're going to game plan. They're going to have their kids ready to play every Friday night. So if you plan to go to Edie White and beat them, you're going to have to limit the mistakes and you're going to have to really play a near perfect game because they're not going to just hand the game to you. It's always a fight against Edie White. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. I know they have a new coach. After losing Coach Minton, Brian Wallace, who is a former Nichols assistant, is now the head coach at Vanderbilt. Luckily for him, he has a really experienced group. A lot of those kids that are at Vanderbilt, they've been playing for like the last 4 and 5 years. And so the key now is, getting some young people to fill in some gaps that they lost from last year. They lost a lot of really good players to graduation, but they got one of the best players in our area and maybe the state in Jalen Coleman. And I've been watching Jalen since he was in elementary school. Every year he's getting bigger and better. And now he's committed to Liberty, but he had a lot of big offers on the tables. Oregon's, he has some SEC offers, Big 10, Big 12. One thing about Jalen is he's fast, but he can make you miss. And he's also pretty physical for his size. I've seen him truck some defenders. I see him use his elusiveness to break away for some really big players. So Jalen is definitely, in my opinion, I don't really think a lot of people across the state really know who he is yet, but down here in the Bayou, they always say that Jalen reminds them of, Eli McGuire's and a lot of really good running backs that we've had, Philip Livis, that we've had come from Homer that went on to have great college careers and make it to the NFL. So I think Jalen is in that crop where he's going to be the next step. And this is his senior year. And I think he's averaged last 4 years over 1,500 yards a season. He's done everything. The key for Vanderbilt now is they got this great weapon, and I know they're trying to rebuild their lines. So Vanderbilt is usually really known for good offensive line play, good defensive line play, but now they're going to have some new players stepping in. So hopefully if they can get those, that physical punch and along the lines ready to go, I think that, Vanderbilt can make some noise. You can't count them out because they're Vanderbilt, they're a really good school that competes every year. Some other teams in the district, you mentioned South Lafourche. South Lafourche is another team. I know they lost their quarterback, Carson Ogeron, to graduation, but Coach BJ Young is a really good coach, and he's keeping them together. He has they may not have, experience there, but, he has some players. One thing about South Lafourche is, they're down the bayou and they're hardworking kids and they take pride in their community. So, they're going to compete hard every night. The fans there are probably one of the biggest fan bases that we have here in the bayou. So they're going to pack the stadiums. They're going to cheer for those guys. So I think South Lafourche is definitely a team that you always got to keep an eye out in that district. And some other teams, South Terrebonne is the same way, Coach Aaron Babin is in his second year at South Terrebonne. They're still trying to get that program up to the level that we've known maybe 15 years ago, where they were competing for districts and making playoff runs. So Coach Aaron Babin is a really good coach, very disciplined and very he's going to have his players ready to play. Now they may not line up athletes like a Terrebonne, where at Terrebonne has a lot of athletes, but they are going to line up and they're going to play you hard. So South Terrebonne, they may not win district, but if they can win a couple games and be in that mix of 3, 4, 5 wins and maybe sneak in the playoffs, that'd be a big win for them. Ellender didn't win a game last year, obviously, but that program is obviously going through a lot right now. They're still dealing with the aftermath of the Hurricane Ida that devastated them. That's you can't say that's an excuse anymore, but you go there at the school, and obviously it is when their school hasn't been rebuilt yet, and but the coaching staff and the players are making the most of it. They're still going out there and they're still competing and they're still fighting. And I know Coach Hazlitt, he's been there at Ellender for like 20 something years, and he's been dedicated to that program as an assistant, now as the head coach. And it'd be nice to see them win a couple games this year, because those kids at Ellender deserve it after all they've been through. And I know they've lost a lot of talent after the hurricane, but they're not giving up. So they may not make the playoffs, but maybe just being there, showing up on Friday nights and competing will be everything for those schools. And I think the last one's Morgan City, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Morgan City is a new coach, Coach Mark Danos. He's coached at HR Bourgeois the last couple of years as an assistant. Morgan City's just like Ellender. They're just trying to get their feet under them right now. I know they won 3 games last year, but the problem for Morgan City is once they get into that very competitive district, it's different from pre-district, obviously. Coach Danos is a very intense coach. He was, I think he was the powerlifting coach at HL last couple of years. So he's bringing life to that program, and they got some really good players. Thomas Mancuso is, a really good quarterback, a big arm, a really good baseball player. Now, Morgan City, Ellender, they're not going to compete for district championships, but they are, definitely going to try to set the tone for the future, and that's the goal. They may not win a lot of games this year, but maybe 3-4 years down the line, get those fans something to look forward to, and that's the key for them. But when you look at that district, I think Letcher right now may be the favorite, and that's just, that's a credit to what Coach Jenkins has been able to do. Assumption's going to be right there. Vanderbilt and Edie White's also going to be right there. You can't count those teams out. This could be a really fun district, and if you have a chance to come watch those teams in that 8-4-8 district, definitely come down, because they're traditional good, and they got some really hardworking schools on that bayou with some really passionate fans.
Yeah, I agree with you from the outside. It feels like Letcher is probably the favorite, but some of those games on Friday nights late in the season, between those 4 in particular, that District 2 4A that Neville moves up from now becomes a much different looking district. Neville has run their district in 4A for so long. And so Franklin Parish, West Washita, and Wasman from the area, again, with some Senla teams in Tioga, Grant, and Peabody. How wide open does that district potentially look, particularly with, what Adrian Burnett and company have done in bringing Franklin Parish along? And West Washita has been better in recent years than they were when I was up there. Wasman has come on under Coach Cahey. And so there's a lot of opportunity for those Monroe area teams.
Yeah, I like this district a lot too. It's not as deep. I don't think, even though Mike Rainwater is quick to point out, hey man, everybody in our district went to the playoffs last year. So he's kind of been banging that drum, but I like those 3 teams you just mentioned. Franklin Parish is really building something. Desarian Ellis, the quarterback, he's back. And, I know Adrian Burnett's really high on what they return, and they're going to have some solid guys up front too. West Washita is a team that, never really had a chance, I don't think, in District 2-5A, but they're still solid. Like, they're a solid football team. I don't think they ever should have been in 5A, but now if they're in 4A, competing against these teams, they play a physical brand of football. They've got a quarterback who's a senior. He's been playing since he was a freshman with Sam Ozark. MJ Owens is a little bowling ball at fullback. I love watching him play. Luke Jones on defense is a playmaker for them all over the field. Their defense has a chance to be really good. And their defense was really good last year, even playing in District 2-5A. I think I counted there was like 7 games where they gave up 20 or fewer points last season. So they return a lot of those guys. And then you look at Wassman, and I love what Wassman has returning. Wassman broke through last year. Terrence Cahey's a great coach, doing a great job at Wassman. And if you look at what they bring back, it's a lot of familiar names. They got to replace their backfield. They lost Trey Mason, who's a standout receiver, to Bastrop. He transferred to Bastrop. Great basketball player, too. I'm sure most people probably know him from basketball. But I still like what they return. Defensively, their secondary is going to be stout. They got a guy in R.J. Wilson who's made play after play. Keyshawn Hines, he's getting some looks from colleges. Fred Clark recently committed to ULM, and Keyshawn Hines actually got an offer from Grambling. So, it's really they got a lot of great players. And so you look at it, physicality. If you like physicality, that district's for you. I think West Washita versus Wassman is going to be a rock'em sock'em robot affair. And Franklin Parish could be the favorite just with what they return. But I think those 3 are going to have some battles.
When you look at the outlook for Grant, Peabody, and Tioga, what kind of catches your eye about those teams and now, seemingly a really good opportunity in 2-4A?
And ironically, I got a chance to talk to all 3 coaches this past week, and they said the same thing. Wow, it's now open here. And now the big bad wolf is now gone there. But, they also said the same thing about they can't overlook a team like Wassman, who's coming up now into from 3A to 4A now, and especially with Terrence Cahey given the opportunity to really improve that team over there. It's going to be pretty interesting to see here because obviously Grant has been a solid team over the last couple of years. I know they took a little bit of a step back, but Jarvis Felton has had this team and is willing to get this team opportunity to do pretty well. I think they got a kid that played baseball that's going to be their quarterback this season, and they got some skilled players, at least on the defensive side, that's going to really help them out this year. Tioga is going to be a little bit of a step back, I think, for them. Caleb Andrews now goes to Acadiana. That's a big blow for their team. But Coach Cook said that he has a sophomore linebacker that they feel pretty high on, that eventually he'll get to Andrews' level, but it's just now you have to replace a guy that could have possibly been one of our top players in the area from go. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do from there. But I think Peabody, as far as everything, I think they may have the horses, no pun intended, to also at least compete in that district there. I feel like it could come down between them and Wassman, depending on what Franklin Parish may have. But I think it could come down between them and Wassman, and especially with the growth of Larry Roberts and then also TJ Hullaby for him to throw the ball to. So I'm interested in seeing that.
You have that really deep in terms of numbers 6-4A district where Bel Air, Broadmoor, Bruley, Estruma, who is come back on under Sid Edwards, McKinley, Plaquemine, St. Michael, Tara, and Westphal. That's another district that the last few years has been really feisty and has the ability to see some interesting matchups on given Friday nights that can surprise some folks with some outcomes here and there.
Oh, they were good last year. That was probably one of the more fun districts to follow last year because, before the argument was you really only had 1 or 2 teams to look at and you had a little bit more interplay. Struma made it a whole lot more interesting with that, but also St. Michael. And, they've picked up a quarterback in Camel who moved from McKinley to St. Michael. That's going to be interesting. He was a dynamic playmaker last year. And, Plaquemine is consistently the pick to win the district, and you can understand why. I think most people don't believe it. But overall, they probably have maybe as many or more college signees in the last 10 to 15 years as Catholic. And most people don't realize that. They have, 3 or 4 guys in the pros in the NFL? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And they just this will be the second year under Coach Donald Williams, and they seem to be kind of hitting their stride and figuring it out and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. Westphal with Coach Devin Ducote, may not have a big blue chipper like they have with Joel Rogers, but they always are very athletic and can do a lot of different things. Coach Ducote's mindset, of course, is defensive, but I'm kind of curious to see how this group evolves.
That 7-4A district, you mentioned Hannon a second ago, losing a key player. Archbishop Hannon's in there with Franklinton, Lakeshore, LaRanger, and Pearl River. You got some teams now in a second year under a new coach, or in LaRanger's case, they've got a fourth-year starter at quarterback that's been so great for that program. And the Lakeshore program that's been so strong for so long, probably excited to see Salmon head on up to 5A after last year. But what do you look for this year in 7-4A? What's kind of your expectation, or some a favorite you're looking at, or some key storylines to watch?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for 7-4A is, that's in a district where I talked with Brett Indes at Lakeshore, and they're going to play some more two-way players. Does that mean they're going to go 100% both ways? No, but they're going to have people at their skill positions who are going to play running back in DB, or, linebacker and running back, that sort of thing. They're trying to maximize their speed. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of these teams, I think all of them do now, because since Salmon's gone, play in the Division II playoffs, which is 4A and 3A. So for the regular season, you're playing a 4A schedule, but in the playoffs, you're going to play this mix of sort of the lower half of the 4A enrollment-wise. So that's a lot more two-way players. And I think a lot of these programs that sort of embrace that district lost a team with Salmon moving up, so it's 5. So we go back to the scheduling thing. You can do a lot more scheduling-wise, PowerPoint-wise, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of these teams are going to embrace putting their best athletes on the field in whether it be 60% of the time on defense and 100% on offense, or vice versa. But I think that you're going to see a lot of these great athletes on these teams play 60-70% of the snaps in a game. And I think that'll sort of be the telling point for this district. I still think Franklinton probably wins it. Salta Formaggio's done a good job there. He's in his second year. There's a lot of talent there. This district's also pretty wide open, I think. I would probably put them first. They've got Connor McGee coming back. He's a great talent. I would probably put Lakeshore and Pearl in the same boat, in that Pearl River has Tashad Badon, who's a pretty special back if he can stay healthy and really embrace that bell cow role, because he's never done that before. So this will be his first season, like true bell cow. He's a pretty special talent. So they have the ability. They've got a new quarterback, Braden Hutchinson, who's very good. I think they'll be able to be a little more multiple on offense this year, which will be key for them. But again, it goes back to staying healthy, because a lot of these teams are going to have players on both sides of the ball, and they're going to have 22 to 22. They can stack up against anybody. But if they lose key members of that 22, how much do they fall off? How much do those other players step up? I think Lakeshore is a sneaky team, in that Indes hired his nephew Cody Bodie, who was at Kaplan. They got Bo Brunner, who was at Shaw, the defensive backs coach, is now at Lakeshore. I think he really trusts what he has on defense now, and I think he's going to spend a little more time on offense. He mentioned that when I talked to him. That can be an X factor. It's year 3 for them. I think, the coaching in this district is also very good. That could be a big X factor for them. And also, I'll break it here first, but they're going to go to the shotgun wing. So get ready for wing T spread football. I don't know what it looks like. I've seen it in practice. I like it. It's fun. It has elements of both. So that'll be fun to watch. And then LaRanger, you mentioned they've got some talent back. The running back's pretty special. That district, as far as I look at it, is pretty wide open. I give Franklinton the edge, but I think you can make an argument for Franklinton, Pearl, or Lakeshore based on health, and sort of each of those teams has a question mark. Lakeshore has some new offensive linemen coming back. How do they fit in? Pearl River, while we like the quarterback, he's still making his first time starting at the varsity level. He should be good, but you're still first time taking live rounds at the varsity level. How did that work out? And, health is always I'll say that over and over again, but health is always the biggest thing. I think, especially on the North Shore, like there's good programs, but I think the skill players are getting more and more fragmented. You don't see those crazy Shaw or crazy like card teams where you have 7, 8, 9, 10 D1 prospects. You see Nate Shepard and a bunch of really good football players around him prospect wise. So if you lose a guy that's your D1 prospect, everything changes a lot on the offense. You can still be good, but you don't have that sort of next level talent. I think that's the case for a lot of these teams in 7-4A.
Huge thanks again to everyone who took some time to share their info and outlooks on what should be another awesome Louisiana high school football season. Make sure to check out all of their work throughout the season, and make sure to subscribe to the Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel. I'm Jarrett Roser, and I think I speak for all of us when I say thanks so much for your passion and support of high school sports around our state. Thanks so much for tuning in here, and make sure to keep an eye out for the rest of these previews.